All right. Um, Welcome back, ladies. And in fact, let us welcome our guests, our friends, our followers, the Kisima family. We always refer to everyone who connects with the heartbeat of Kisima as a Kisima family member. So today we are starting a new podcast series under the theme Active Citizenry. And it's very exciting, to me, and not just to me only. I know a couple of my friends who shared their comments when they saw the invitation, were like, you know what, this is the perfect time for the community members, especially, to be sensitized on the importance of their individual role and contribution in the development of our communities. Of course, this speaks to both your rights and responsibilities. Anyway, let me welcome my guests before I get further excited. My panelists rather. We've got Utah. If I pronounce it incorrectly, please correct me. And she's from Civics Academy. And we've got Pearl Mahlanyana from a community a movement, Abigail Women's Movement. I don't know why, Pearl, today I just forget the name of your organization. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Utah, did I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Uta, so you start with a U, but it's no problem. It's not an easy name.
Okay. Welcome, Uta. Like we were chatting earlier on, the excitement, we all share the same sentiment. And I think, let's first allow you to greet our listeners.
So who goes first? I can go first. A good day to everybody. Good day to the Kisima family. My name is Pearl Mahlanyana, director of an NGO. Some would call it a community-based organization. Some would call it a non-profit that works and operates out of Khayelitsha. We obviously work with Khayelitsha, but then we also have the outlying areas of Khayelitsha as well. As I said, I think when we were talking to Nosipho and Uta earlier on, that you know how it is with community work, you start as one thing by constantly responding to issues and responding to problems that keep on coming up. 10 years down the line, it's either you have totally metamorphed and you've become something totally different, or you've become an octopus. You've got so many extensions that, you don't look anything like you did when you started. So that is us, that is Abigail Women's Movement in Khayelitsha.
Beautiful. Thank you, Pearl. Briefly about Civics Academy, let me hand over to Uta.
Thank you very much, Nosipho, and thank you for the warm welcome. We're very happy to be here on the show today. My name is Uta Lehmann, and I'm managing Civics Academy, which is a not-for-profit online educational project in South Africa, initiated and run by the Hans Seidel Foundation, a German political foundation. Civics Academy was launched by the Hans Seidel Foundation and the Nelson Mandela Foundation in 2016 to strengthen civics education in the country, and we've come a long way. We produce videos and podcasts and other material, other educational resources that are relevant to Africa's constitutional democracy and democratic values and responsible citizenship. We've produced more than 50 videos and podcasts on issues like democracy, the South African Constitution, governance, elections, local government, and also economics. And I'll stop here and speak more later.
Awesome. And I must say, I've went through a couple of your videos. You've got amazing content in your website. So I'd like to encourage, everyone who's watching, please visit Civics Academy website. You won't regret it. So, ladies, we are welcoming the Freedom Month in South Africa. And as I was sitting and thinking about the start of this podcast series on active citizenry, I was really, challenged by the reality that I face every day, you know, as I work with the community, and especially the community of Khayelitsha. And now we hear, since the dawn of democracy, we hear so many fancy terminology that actually are supposed to give hope, and not just to give hope to especially the marginalized communities, but they are supposed to bring transformation in the lives of community members. Now, can we first zoom into the concept of democracy? Can we unpack democracy in a very simple way that, you know, even the high school learners that we work with now can confidently say, I understand what democracy is?
I think I'll try to do that from the community perspective, because I represent community. I represent Khayelitsha. I represent what the so-called marginalized, I suppose. I think for us, we would interpret democracy as a rule of many through representation. That is a very loose interpretation we would come out with, or we would define democracy as.
Yes.
It's a very loose interpretation. Sorry, I came in. It's a very loose interpretation we would use to define democracy. But then what I find interesting, I think I went through, but then obviously I won't mention it because obviously the platform is not for this. I went through, I think it was Plato I was looking at, and his definition of democracy that is totally, totally different from what we currently define and know as democracy, but it's another conversation for another time. But then I found that very, very interesting. My goodness, what we have come to believe as democracy, and what I would like to think maybe he was one of the founders of the term, or the I don't know, the core, whatever of the term, coins it totally and defines it totally, totally different from what we've come to interpret it as. So yeah, from a community perspective, this is what we would say. We would say democracy is a rule of many through representation for the interest of the greater or the whole.
Thank you. Thank you, Pearl. Uta.
Yeah, I can only agree. I don't think the Greek meaning is that different. I think from the Greek, it starts with demos, which means the people, and kratos, which means the rule. So literally meaning of democracy is the rule by the people. And I agree with Pearl, it's the rule, democracy means the rule of the majority, the rule of the many. And yeah, instead of having one person making all the decisions, democracy brings together the views and the interests of all the people that live in that democracy, so that the future of the country can be decided based on, you know, the views of the many, the views of the majority. And whereas in a direct democracy, if you watch our video on what is a democracy or the key features of democracy, you'll learn that. Whereas in a direct democracy, the people govern themselves. So each person would have a direct say in every single decision that affects the country, which is quite difficult to implement. In a democracy like South Africa's democracy, we call it a representative democracy. We elect representatives to represent our interests and to govern the country. And this happens through regular elections in line with the South African Constitution. It's important to remember that regular democratic elections are not the only key feature of a democracy. Although we would say every country or different countries might be differently democratic, I think all democracy, they rest upon certain fundamental principles that need to be present in order to have a well-functioning democracy. And these principles include, for example, the respect for basic human rights, a multi-party system paired with political tolerance, respect for the rule of law, democratic governance, and citizen participation. And yes, in terms of marginalized and disadvantaged communities, I think, Pearl, that's more your focus area, because you're working in such a community. They often still remain excluded from effective economic and political participation. And I think a big factor is that the lack of civic education in these communities also, it doesn't help the cause. The lack of civic education is actually hindering communities to drive active democracy. But I think we can see that there is, social movements, community action is starting to take a key role in laying the foundations for some kind of like middle institutions or actors that are capable of representing the demands of marginalized people to the state. So for example, like community actions or initiatives like Kisima Radio or the Abigail's Women's Movement, these are all addressing the needs of the disadvantaged communities and helping to give those disadvantaged communities a voice. And therefore helping to uphold, democratic values.
Wow. You both of you mentioned critical aspects of democracy, and as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, my goodness, where does this whole civic education start? Who is responsible for it? Because here we're talking issues of the Constitution, where you find your ordinary community members, members of the society, actually don't understand the content of the Constitution. So whose responsibility is it to make sure that the citizens of the country are educated, or rather they get civic education and are empowered and equipped, to be able to hold those who are in power accountable? Because it's all again about striking the balance between the might and the right. So where does it begin?
Again, one would think it will begin with the government. But then again, you know me, you know where my thoughts lie. It will begin with the government, making sure that the education system, for one, takes up this role in ensuring that even our youngest are exposed to and sensitized to issues of government. It would take the community itself, through different associations. For instance, Blacks or Africans, naturally, we organize ourselves. We organize ourselves all of the time. We are organized in church settings. How are those organizations or how are those forums used to not only empower one-dimensionally, but then how are those platforms used to ensure that civic education basically happens? How, for instance, from a Christian point of view, because I am a Christian, how do we describe and how do we interpret the word of God to include, obviously, civic awareness, social awareness or social responsibility, and obviously understanding of the very basic things like your constitution, because remember, the constitution impacts and affects everybody. Whether I know it or I don't know it, I'm not excluded from being affected or impacted on by the constitution. Whether it impacts me in terms of me being aware of my rights and acting in such a way that I'm enabled to access my rights, or I'm inopportune because I do not know what my rights are. So the question would be then, how do we use the church? How do we use our civil structures? Because remember, you would have your Sankos. What is the responsible of Sanko over and above bread and butter issues? Because remember, they deal directly with communities. So for me, it would be education. For me, it would be our civil structures. How are we using our civil structures? How are we using the different forums that we gather in and gather at to facilitate that? How do we get to a point where, yes, while it is maybe primarily a government responsibility, but now how do we get to a point where those that know in the community makes it their responsibility to ensure that my neighbor knows and understands democracy and what is expected of them in a democratic situation, or what they can leverage out of a democratic situation, and how can I, understanding the Constitution, improve my living conditions for one, so that I'm enabled again to live in a just environment. Obviously, for me, it takes an inclusive approach of government and the citizens. Obviously here I'm talking about citizens that are aware of really what needs to happen. Because even in marginalized communities, it's not everybody that doesn't know what democracy is. Because you would find there would be those amongst us who knows exactly why educated. Because it's not everybody that left the community as soon as they made money. Some of us decided to stay in. Now, how do we interpret our staying in? Why did we stay? Why did we stay behind? Why did we choose to live in communities? And what are we doing by the fact that we are living in communities? So for me, it's a joint effort. It's everybody's responsibility. And if we leave this thing to just one grouping or government or whatever, it might just never really get done.
Yeah, I can totally agree. Sorry. If I can come in, I can totally agree with what Phil says. And I think, a very important role is also the educational institutions, schools, even kindergarten, that can teach the basic principles about, rights and responsibilities. We vote for things that we'd like. They can teach stuff about the environment and caring for each other, for the environment. So I think it starts with early childhood education and goes all the way through school. And like Pearl said, it doesn't end with the government providing all the solution answers. There are, non-governmental organizations, forums, community development forums, community action. Everybody, that should help promoting active citizenry and promoting civic education. Obviously, if the education is not existing within a group or community, then that's something where we can start, where we can help promote it and support it.
I think another challenge, as I'm listening to you ladies, is that we're talking educate the community, empower, equip the community. However, we are dealing with, angry communities, and personally, I can't blame them. Well, not them, because I'm part of the community. We always talk of a wounded society. Now, how do we strike a balance? How do I begin to say to Unomsa or Umonde, look, I know the pain that you are experiencing. I see the reality of the social ills that are so overwhelming, and not that I'm justifying any behavior that seems to destroy the very same infrastructure or any other, infrastructure that is there already. But now, how do I educate an angry person, a wounded person, a frustrated person, in the context of the social ills?
Again, we need fundamental questions. What caused the anger to begin with? What caused the pain?
The line is bad.
Line is bad, no? Can you hear me now?
Now we
can you hear me now, Sips?
Yes.
You can hear me. I think we need to address what caused the anger, what the pain, what caused the need to educate an angry person, and go back. I get back to the saying, being of understanding the role of each other.
Okay, so perhaps you can change, try to find a sweet spot. We're struggling to hear you. In the meantime,
yeah, let me just take over. I think what Pearl tried to say is that you know, we need to address the root causes of the anger and the that's as far as I understood it. Yes, I agree. I also think we need to look ahead and you know, approach the solution oriented and say, look, addressing the root causes is one step in the right direction, and acknowledging the root causes and acknowledging the pain, and also looking ahead and saying, from now on, what will help is that you're educated about your rights and your responsibilities so that you can hold the people that govern you accountable. It doesn't help to express anger without knowing, you know, what are my rights and what are my responsibilities? Where can I start to be an active citizen? What can I do to change the situation? And sometimes it's small things and small steps, you know. How can I improve my community? What can I do to set a good example so that others will follow me, and so that others will gain that sense of community and of active citizenship and responsive citizenship as well. So I think that's another thing that we can look at. And I mean, there are small and big steps that we can take to become an active citizen, even without belonging to like a civil society formation or to a political party. You know, there are things like picking up litter. And just, you know, we can organize clean the streets or clean the beach or clean the veld or clean the forest actions, where we include the community and we show like the sense of community. We're sharing something. It's a good approach. It's something that helps us maybe healing and helps us looking forward. It's like, okay, from now on, this is how we're going to build up. We can donate time to educate others, to help others, to upskill others, to show appreciation for our neighbors and for the marginalized people that are even worse off than we are. We can volunteer at handing out food parcels or soup kitchens. All these are things that make us feel valuable as valuable members of the society, and eventually also help us to be an active citizen. We can and we can do bigger things like getting to know our local ward councillor, meeting her or him and understanding what is he or she actually responsible for, communicating our issues that we have in the community to the councillor, so that he can communicate the needs of the community to the municipal council, and also then communicate council process back to the community. We can attend meetings. We can, you know, raise issues of concerns from the community to the council. We can volunteer as observers in elections. That's now on an even bigger scale. We can participate in all kinds of public policy processes, such as IDP meetings. We can comment in bills. Actually, there are lots of things. We can run petitions, and even run as an independent candidate in elections. I'm just saying, you know, there are options. I think the issue is that obviously people need to know about these options, and they need to understand that sometimes it takes very little to achieve something, and we can grow bigger and bigger in our actions.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me. Is my thing better now? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So am I answering? I didn't. Do I go back to what I was saying, or do I continue with the next question? I think in answering, in going back to what I was saying, is maybe in us trying to deal with this, we need to get to the bottom of what went wrong to begin with. If we're talking pain, what caused the pain? What caused the angst? What caused the anger? So that when we begin to teach, we teach a whole person, not a wounded person, because it's difficult teaching a wounded person, because remember, they hear you from their pain, they will hear you from their angst, and they're disappointed, and whatever information they have, it's filtered through that place of pain and disappointment and all of that. So maybe one of the things we need to do is to look into that as well, and also look at the role. I think Uta has touched on a number of things. Look at the roles of the different formations again, from your Sankos and the ward councillor and everything. But now here we are assuming that the system is perfect. We're assuming that I'm happy with my councillor is doing her job. We're assuming that the situation is ideal for us to be able to do that. But now in a situation that is not ideal, how do we do this? Because remember, now this is a situation that we are working in Khayelitsha. Remember, now we're talking about a community that has a history, that they have a place that they come from, and the pain and the history and the disappointments and the hopes that were dashed, expectations that were not met, have formed, the overall psyche of this community. So now we are distrusting people. We do not trust easily, and because we do not trust easily, sometimes we lash out from time to time. We do not even believe some of the messages that we get from what we perceive as others. On the other hand, we have jettisoned, or we have moved away from values that formed us as a people. We have termed things that made us us, like Ubuntu. We have turned them into concepts, foreign concepts that have come in instead of the very values and the very things that formed us as people. So that things that drove our humanity, things that drove our actions, have suddenly become packaged concepts of NGOs and other people, not the values that we were brought up with, or the values that formed an African child. So for me, we need to go back. We would say in my language, where did we miss this? Where did we go wrong? What has caused us to be angry? So that when I'm dealing then with other institutions now in a quest to answer the questions that you've answered, I go there now fully healed, or at least partly healed, if nothing else. But then I go there healed, and I'm go there enabled to engage with the external environment, to engage with maybe an environment that doesn't necessarily, encourage my development, maybe, but then engage it and challenge it in such a way that it gives me space to find myself, engage with it and understand that, this is what I have, this is what I have to work on. And for me to go to the next level, I need to keep my environment clean. But now it needs me to start thinking in a different way. It needs me to deal with the pain. It needs me to deal with the space that, to deal with the issue that, I was promised something and somebody owes me something. And again, for me to get there, what caused that? Because remember, I think for me, there was a conditioning that happened through time. A conditioning that told me, for me to get anything, I have to depend on government. For me to get anything, I have to depend on another person. And now I'm hamstrung with abilities that I don't even know I have. With graces that I don't even know I carry, because now I'm waiting for somebody else to do these things for me. But we need, as a society, to understand that there is a history here. And the history has gotten us to the space that we are at. And we're not saying, now let us sit down and fold our hands. Now, let us get up, go back to where we have missed this thing, solve that. And now there's different NGOs and information and different structures, the church included, do you know what I mean, that can come on board and ensure that we solve the pain and the angst and the disappointment and expectations are met and all of that forms, based in most cases, somebody who's trying to live and survive in a township. But obviously that's not everybody's experience, but by and large, that's what you hear all the time.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Pearl. Thank you. Both you and Uta, I hear from your input, I hear the importance of identifying my pain and acknowledging that I've got this pain, whether I'm the one to receive the education, or I'm the one who's delivering the civic education. But the importance of first acknowledging that this pain, the root cause of this pain, and now where to from here. And I guess we spoke of these different formations, not only the government, but this civil society formations, the importance of equipping, the citizens, or basically at community level. So that means that we need to be intentional in dealing with, in education, or rather in wanting or in implementing this civic education. And now, even if a person can come and say, I want to do it, but now where do I start? How do I do it? Who is available out there with the right content that will not only empower me, but literally liberate my mind, so that I begin to build, using models, new models that will do justice in humanity. So my question is,
steps, even as we do that.
And how do they start? Especially Pearl, Uta, can you respond? Can you come in here quickly, Pearl? Please don't forget your point, because Uta's organization, they've been running these trainings, so perhaps you can help us there. A person that says, or an organization that says, well, we would love to empower, community members. We would love to train people and capacitate people, but where do we start?
It's a very good question. Thank you, Nosipho. Well, so our content, Civics Academy content, is all online and it's open access. So basically, everybody can use it. Everybody already that has access to internet and it has access to data, which is the first challenge. We acknowledge that, and we are looking at options to get data-free websites. But yeah, I mean, that civic education needs to be available to everyone. That's our aim. We want to provide this education. We're putting it online. Everybody can listen to it. The videos are on YouTube, on our website, and they are fairly accessible, given the fact that you've got a mobile device or a laptop or something to watch them, to listen to them, and to have the data. But as I said before, I think, where do you start? I think you start in education institutions, at kindergarten, at schools. It should be part of the curriculum. It should be part of the daily or weekly or monthly teaching. It shouldn't be something that's separate from other education. It's part of our general education. So that's where you start from an institutional perspective. From an individual perspective, obviously, there are many NGOs in South Africa that deal with matters of civic education and that offer trainings, and often it's at grassroots level, which is very good because they reach out to the communities, and even municipalities. Some municipalities reach out to their communities to make them understand better what local government actually means, and what is a councillor, and what's his or her responsibilities. So that I think there are different options. I think, we still have that mismatch of people having the access to these kind of resources, and the institutions providing that kind of assistance. The word needs to be spread. That's why, we are also now going onto social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to spread the word, to say, look, this is the content, please use it, please take it. But the obviously communities need to be capacitated to receive the education as well. They need to have, the time and the energy, and not be, absorbed by their pain and by other daily struggles and issues.
I think also for me, the first place to start is curriculum development. The curriculum developed, does it speak to me? Does it speak to my reality? Is it interpreted in such a way that I can connect and understand it, because it resonates with me, it resonates with my situation? Because again, the danger of importing from other communities that are doing well, and importing things as are, and then tweak them here and there, and then train in communities that are dealing with complex issues, complex situations, becomes quite irky, to say the least. Because remember, we said when we started, there's a history and a history that has conditioned me, and a history that has gotten me where I am. The history is not always bad, obviously, but then the history has got painful and bad things to it. I'm not even talking about apartheid here anymore. I'm talking about a collective of realities that an African child has had to go through, a collective of realities that her mother and her grandmother had to go through. And obviously that has been passed on from generation to generation. And now this child has become an embodiment of a society in pain. We are not saying, obviously, we are not throwing our hands up in the air and saying, no, all is lost. But we are saying, even though there's a history, there's positive history as well in our traditions and our cultures as Black people. Because remember, we come from somewhere, there's a history there. Now, how do we then incorporate who we are in essence, who I am as an African woman coming from the Transkei, coming to live in Khayelitsha, trying to make a living, trying to make real my reality that is not so nice after all, because maybe I thought I was coming to greener pastures, and I get here, my dear, nothing is green there. It's all struggle. And remember, I'm living struggle back at home as well, because I keep hoping that something changes. And now remember, it's on a bigger scale, things were different. We'll be emancipated in every way possible. And that is not happening. That is now on a bigger scale, on a corporate scale as an African people. Now you're talking to this young woman who's come here. And yes, we want to train them up in civic education, which is a good thing, which is a brilliant thing. But are there aspects to it that do not speak to me? Hence, while I hear it, it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. But now, how do I interpret it to deal with my reality? How do I interpret it to work with me? So for me, I love what you're doing, which I love it very much. But for me, I would like, my goodness, it was so wonderful if we could start this at curriculum development level and work with the community to develop the type of curriculum that would speak to them and assist them to kind of governance for them, not something that we've imported from Europe. I'm making an example here. Okay, it might work in Europe, might not always work exactly here, because there's other dynamics and other realities that we have to take into account. So for me, it would be wonderful. For me, democracy would be when a system of governance that is speaking directly to the citizen, that addresses their very issues that are not imported from elsewhere, but recognizes the history and the stories and the realities and the pain of the citizens, and incorporate that into an education system or a system of policies that speaks to them, so that when it comes to implementation and interpretation time, we connect with this. We can literally do this because we understand it. We understand it. We understand where it's taking us, because we recognize that it acknowledges me as a human being. I feel, you know what, I'm recognized, I'm seen. So things do not come from the outside, but it recognizes that I'm here. I'm not only recognized when I need to cast a vote. I'm recognized that I'm valuable. I'm recognized that I've got something to add. My history is recognized. My traditions are recognized. My values are recognized. Everything that I am is recognized in doing this thing. So when we start teaching, we teach from that point of view. And now it becomes easier, I think, for us also to begin to interact with others. No, it's not others in a negative way again. It's others because we've come to a space of equity. We've come to a space of equality where I'm okay as an African. And what I believe in and what I stand for is okay. And Uta is okay as a European. And now we can come and exchange, skills. We can come and exchange expertise. We can come and exchange ideas in how we build a South Africa that is inclusive, a South Africa that will no longer have marginalized communities, but a South Africa that would have somebody staying in an area because they love staying in it, and that is a South African that is able to negotiate their settlement and their living realities. So for me, it would move from, as you're saying, ECD, let's start with curriculum development. Let's talk to the parent. Let's talk to the pastor. Let's talk to the average mother that sells fat cook in the corner of the street. Let's talk to the professor in UCT. No, let's talk to the scientists that came out of Kailicha and made it through the hardships. Let's talk as a nation so that we can come with something that would work for us as South Africans, and that would work for us as Africans. And when I'm saying Africans, I'm not talking color here. I'm talking those that find themselves in this continent. So let's come together and let us build this thing together.
All right. Yes, Phil, I totally agree. Sorry, just to give a short response, I totally agree. And that's why our material is carefully sourced. So it's written by South Africans. It's reviewed and proofread and checked by South Africans, by experts on obviously the constitution and democracy and the rule of law. And I totally agree. It needs to start with the curriculum, and the curriculum needs to be flexible to adapt to the different, needs of the group. So when we look at school education or college education, then the material that we create is just the base, and then the facilitator and the course that's based on this material obviously needs to then approach directly the target group and have a targeted approach. So just to give you one example, I said that we've developed this lecturer guide for students at TVET colleges for the subject of life orientation. That's it's part of their mandatory program, and the students and the teachers and the lecturers, they all, we've done research and we found out that life orientation is not a very popular subject. The concept of, especially the concept of citizenship and democracy education is quite abstract. And so students, don't really like to engage with it. Lecturers are also sometimes helpless of how to teach it. It speaks exactly to what you say, Pearl. There's a mismatch of the needs and also where the backgrounds that people come from. So that lecture guide that we created, we actually created it so flexible. It's based on our Civics Academy videos of what are human rights, why is civic education important, why should I vote? And then these videos are taken and put into a lesson and a framework that speaks exactly to the needs and the backgrounds of the students. So for one of the videos is, what does it mean to be a responsive citizen? And during COVID times, we changed the guide and the structure of the lesson and said, look, responsive also during COVID means, how do I sew a mask, or how do I build a tippy tank? And that's that was then the task that was given to students so that they can do something that's valuable for their community and for their needs during this special time. So I totally agree with what Pearl says, that it needs to the lessons and sessions and civic education needs to be based obviously on the constitution and on the theoretical concepts of democracy, but also needs to adapt to the background and to the certain needs of the community and the group that it's directed at.
Sure. Wow. Thank you, ladies. Time, we left with like 10 minutes. I didn't realize the time went so fast. Okay, I don't think we are going to finish our conversation today. And I didn't want to rush it also because I could hear that both you ladies, your input is actually needed. It's not just, a matter of having a conversation, but I'm so challenged, to go out there and make a difference based on what you guys have said. But my one last question on the point of democracy. It's quite a tricky one, and I don't expect you to have a specific answer. So how would one measure the impact or the success of democracy?
Yeah, I'm happy to elaborate a little bit on it. Well, to live in a democratic society means, as we said before, it's the rule of the majority. And how do we measure that? We measure that, well, one very simple measure is by voting, to see how many people are actually participating in elections. Because we live in a representative democracy, so we need to elect representatives that then govern the country, and we are the ones that choose the people. So if the majority goes to the election and votes, that's one big measure of a successful democracy, because then we vote for our representatives. Yeah, sorry, that just to start off with one very obvious measure.
Okay. Paul, as we closing off this point.
All right. I think, okay, let me just quickly answer that. For me, elections with the current act that you are voting under are not democratic at all. Because remember, in a partisan situation, you end up with a councillor you never voted for because you voted for a party. You end up with a president you never necessarily voted for. Because remember, you have no say, on what parties choose or do within their own setup. So while it's perceived as democratic, for me, it lacks in a number of ways. Because I do not have, if I'm not an ANC member, I do not have direct say who ends up being my ward councillor. Sometimes even as an agency member, I'm not even happy with who I end up with. Because remember, the current structure as it is does not fully represent the ideals of the people, for lack of a better word. But yes, maybe on one hand, we can say that. But for me, I have issues with the current act as it stands right now. I have no say, basically. I mean, I would
in
look
local
at
government elections, the last local government elections,
elections, that would be slightly different. Now, in local government elections, that would be slightly different because at least now there's room for independent candidates. Then I can then get to have a voice in terms of who I elect into there. But when it comes to national and provincial, until the act change, I have no. So for me, as an indicator, we can use it, but it doesn't necessarily work. It's something that we need to look at, especially when we begin to engage with this. And it's something that we really need to have a conversation about. The electoral system, because as it stands right now, unless it gets revisited, unless it gets reworked and changed, it's not working for the average South African. We ended up with the with who we are being given without having a say in terms of who ends up governing us as a country. But the fact that we vote every 4 years, maybe at least it's an indicator that at least we have regular elections. We keep on going to the voting polls. We keep on, putting in our X in a box. We keep on doing those things. So that is an indicator, maybe then can be okay. But for me, if we can deal with the partisan situation, yeah, it's still an iffy indicator, but it is there. It's something for us to start working and looking at least it's the beginning. At least there's something. Working.
It's the beginning, and then obviously we need to have citizen participation. If we have people participating in the democracy, that also measures how successful the democracy is at the end. The freedom of expression is a way of measuring democracy, the rule of law. That we have individual rights and people enjoy their rights and adhere to the law and to the rules. These are all things how we can measure whether a democracy is successful or not. And I agree, Pearl, it's a long way to go, but it's a good start to knowing what we're looking out for.
Wow. You know what? Let me first apologize to our viewers. I haven't taken any of their questions or input, but I promise as from next week onwards, I will try and manage, my facilitation skills correctly. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much. Next week or in 2 weeks' time, when Uta is available, we need to finish this conversation. We couldn't we didn't get to speak about active citizenry. What does it mean? What does it entail? Where does it start? Where does it end? And what are the restrictions? involved in the process. And when we talk about an active citizen, who are we talking about here? And what kind of support is available out there, to support or the granny and the brother, the sister in their respective communities who say, you know what, I acknowledge the situation, the status quo, and I am not going to sit and watch and expect rather, somebody else to come and rescue me, or somebody else to come and transform my community. I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty, so that generations to come can live better, can experience a better life than what we're experiencing. But now, what kind of support is available out there, and where is that support? How can one access that support? We'll talk about it in our next podcast, which is not next week, but in 2 weeks' time. Ladies, anything from your side as we wrapping up our conversation?
I think from my side, it's exciting that we're beginning to talk about these things. We're not talking about them in little corners, but then platforms are established and platforms are set for us to come together and to peacefully engage and look at these things. Hopefully, we'll do this until something gets in, until something happens. So we live in hope. But I'm excited with the work that Uta is doing, and I'm seeing all sorts of opportunities. With Uta working with different organizations and different grassroots formations to build the type of curriculum and the type of work that would be relevant for us. If even for me in Sightsee in the Shack. I can't wait for that. So I'm inviting Uta to collaborate with us as we do this work and ensure that we give our people what they truly deserve, not what we think they deserve, but what they truly deserve.
Awesome. Thank you, Pearl. Uta?
Yeah, thank you very much, Pearl. I'm very happy and very thankful for your kind feedback. And we are also very excited about this conversation. It's about time that we're starting a conversation on these topics, and on, that we're bringing the word out there, that there is hope, and there is lots to be done, and there's lots already out there, and we just need to connect and collaborate, and then we create the South Africa that everybody wants, and that everybody can live up to. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, viewers. Please do join us again next week on Friday, 3 p.m. sharp, our podcast on active citizenry. Nosipho Mahlanyana is my name from Kisima Radio. Thank you.